What is good, wrestling people? Switch up today, switch up. And we'll get into the switch up pretty quickly. As you will hear, there's no partner. My tag team partner is not here today. So for Sunday Percy's, we'll just get into some behind the podcast news and just kind of put out there that Moody, our French Fry Fro, my half the tag team partner of the Wrestling Re-Up, will not be here today. Some last minute personal issues came up and he just couldn't be able to make it today. He had to give his full time. So nothing too serious. He's doing well. He'll be back next week. But for today, we'll have a solo dolo episode with the Habasha Hayes. And so we'll see if we can keep this on track. Try not to ramble too much. And, we got another pop-up show this week. First one of the year, NXT New Year's Evil. And, we got one coming up last week where we ended up with AEW's World's End, so we'll go through all that. Outside of that, I think we could probably get into the show. I'm not trying to keep people here listening to me for so long, but we'll get into the show and talk about the week of wrestling. So let's start the show.
Doors opening. Step back to allow customers to exit.
Wow. Habasha Hayes, Samson, and usually would be my tag team partner here, French Fry Pro Moody. And you're listening to Wrestling Re-Up Podcast, a weekly stroll through the avenue of wrestling. I'm to pick up. Follow us everywhere on socials: Instagram, Twitter, X, Blue Sky, everywhere you can find us at the Wrestling Re-Up. What's good, everyone? Back again, episode 26 of the Wrestling Re-Up Podcast. I'm not even the French Fry Fro. I'm the Habasha Hayes Samson here. Again, my tag team partner Moody will not be here today, but he's here in spirit. He's left some comments in the Notion doc, so I'll bring those up as we go through the week of wrestling. But let's pick it up where we're at right now. I mean, we ended it last week. Earlier in this week was 2024, and then halfway through the week, it's turned into a new year. So a little bit of a split here, but let's talk about World's End, AEW's World's End. The last pop-up show of 2024 happened, a day or two before New Year's? I forget, but it was a pretty good show. Wild card, another loss for your boy Samson here. So I end out the season, at least the 2024 season, at 1-9-3, and Moody was 9-1-3. The only difference in opinions that we had that basically made the difference is that I had Ricochet winning the C2 finals. He did not beat Okada, which then meant that he would not win in the finals. Moody got Okada going to the finals, correct? And he got Okada winning the championship, retaining the C2 championship. So that pretty much was the edge that we had. Other than that, I had the MJF over Adam Cole. He had Adam Cole winning that match. So the biggest one was just, even if I had picked Ricochet in the semis, it was just continuing with Ricochet in the finals. But I would have lost either way because it would have been Ospreay or Okada, and I didn't have Okada in the finals. But overall, it was a really good card. I actually watched this from pretty much the front to back live, and I really enjoyed the card. There was, as you can expect from AEW, there's just great in-ring work. I think some of my favorite matches were the Ricochet versus Okada. Kyle Fletcher, Ospreay was great as well. Thunder Rosa, Mariah May, that was a pretty good street fight that they had going on. Adam Cole, MJF, decent. I like the ending. It seemed like we might get a reuniting of the Undisputed Era. When you saw some of like Roderick Strong and Kyle O'Reilly kind of come out, and it seems like we might be finally done with the Adam Cole MJF feud as that has played out. Takeshita retained his title against Powerhouse Hobbs. That was a good match. I wish Hobbs pulled it out, but I think we talked about in the predictions that Takeshita kind of just recently won this, so it would seem a little early, but it doesn't seem it's out of Powerhouse Hobbs' near future that he will end up winning this title. Mercedes ended up retaining over Chris Statlander, so we both got that wrong. Pretty good match as well. Again, usually when it's the champion, usually when it's a pop up show, Mercedes usually is able to shine in there. Okada retaining against Osprey. We talked about that quickly, and that was pretty good. And then, yeah, the AEW Championship: John Moxley, Orange Cassidy, Hangman, and Jay White. And we had both picked Moxley, and it pretty much was right. Not pretty much, we were right. But as far as how we projected it, with interference probably coming into play and whatnot, it's kind of what you expected. Um, I do think we're setting up for possibly Jay White in the near future, maybe within the next 6 months to be the guy in AEW to win the championship. It seems like we could, Orange Cassidy and Hangman, they had a match this week we'll get into once we get into Dynamite. But it seems like Jay White is getting positioned to be the guy that is, if for a lack of better terms, if Moxley and the Death Riders are the NWO of this whole situation, it seems like maybe you could position Jay White as, the AEW guy, the Sting, for a lack of better terms. I know there's probably a lot of people, there are other people within AEW that actually have, the original tag, if you want to call it. But Jay White has something that I think is building up really well. And I think if you're able to, not overextend it too long, but I do think there's a pathway to really get the entire audience to really fall behind Jay White. And when he wins that title, I think it's going to be a special moment. But overall, I thought this was a great card. This was a great pop up show. What a way to end out the year. I called it that I was going to end up with another loss because, again, AEW is just like me playing Smash Bros. Like, not good at it, but if y'all need somebody to participate, I will participate. And so just putting that out there. But overall, this was a great show and kind of set up the rest of the week for 2025 for AEW as we kind of get to them once we get to the coffee shop in a little bit. But overall, nothing to really complain about out the show. I really enjoyed it front to back. So again, AEW, that's their hot spot right now is their pop up shows. So to see them be consistent on their pop up shows is really good. But that's enough for AEW's World's End. Now let's crack into the flagship show, and this is a theoretically monumental, flagship show episode with Raw, being that this was the last episode of Raw that was on the USA Network, and by in line means that this is the last Raw that is going to be on just traditional cable. As we all know, as we've been told since last January, and then we've been barraged with plenty of advertisements over the last 3-4 months that Raw will be moving to Netflix next week. And so the final Raw on USA and Era is coming to an end. And you think that there would be a little bit more hype around it, a little bit more, something special might happen. It was a pretty tame show, in my opinion. It was a pretty tame show, but I mean, that has been Raw specifically the last few months, especially once they switched back to 2 hours and, effectively preparing themselves to move over to Raw, move over to Netflix. There were some things that, and the holiday season played a big part in it, a part of it. But it was a lot of things that I was like, okay, this is cool. We're continuing storylines. We're pushing them along as we need to be. We are setting up for next week's big show. I'm pretty sure Raw's going back to 3 hours next week, but we already know we got a stack card with CM Punk versus Seth Rollins. We have the Tribal Chief match between Solo and Roman. That got a little bit more added stakes this week once we get into SmackDown. But again, the biggest things for me that stood out, I didn't have any primos for the show, but the two biggest things that stood out were, I think the main one, and this could have been primo in itself, I think is just more of the fact that we already know what's happening and we're just ready for the match to happen already. Is the Seth Rollins CM Punk promo that believe that ended the show. If not ended the show, was pretty close to the end of the show. As far as the segment and the promo, I mean, yeah, it's a talking segment, face to face, last one before next week in their big match. And you got two great talkers on the mic. CM Punk, as we've said before on this show, that, I think WWE has been using him really well since his return, not overusing him in the ring and, putting excess wear and tear on his body that doesn't necessarily need to happen when you can get just as much done with CM Punk on the mic. And then Seth, again, is another great mic talker. So to have these two in the ring and just kind of go back and forth at it was really good. And then obviously the subject matter and some of the things that they brought up, with Punk talking about I I love this business. I love this place. I just didn't like the person that was running it, but the person that was running it was in love with you, kind of alluding to Vince. Seth Rollins taking jabs at CM Punk. I think about having kids or not and having to take care of them or not take care of them because he doesn't have any. Uh, just a lot of, knife in the gut type of digs at each other that, again, it just gets you up to the hype. I said it a few weeks ago. I think it was after Survivor Series that this is going to be my match. Like CM Punk, Seth Rollins. This is probably what, round 1 or 2. I can't remember if they had another one before this, but this is only the first step in our road to WrestleMania. I'm really curious to see how this plays out. At this current moment, I would say it's a toss up. My bias leans me to my guy Seth Rollins, but I could definitely see Punk pulling this out. But it is going to be an interesting match. I think this is the most highly anticipated match because I think it offers the least amount of predictability that we might be getting from next week. And then again, we're on the road to WrestleMania. It's officially January, so Royal Rumble's in a couple weeks. We got a Saturday night's main event, and I think the ball is just going to continue to roll with these guys, and it's going to be hard to knock these guys off a primo. The only thing you would not put them on primos for is just the fact that it's like, okay, we're just getting ready for the match to happen. This is all great talking. It's not necessarily bad. It's just more, you can't even hype this up any more than it can be. This is exactly where we need to be. And so I'm excited. This is the most exciting match that I have for next week when we get to Raw and Netflix. I don't think it's going to be the end of it. And I'm really curious to see what happens moving forward with these guys going into WrestleMania season. So, big things could pop up with them in the Royal Rumble if they're both in the Royal Rumble. So we'll see what happens with Seth and Punk. This is definitely right now feud of the year, and it's early, but hey, you had you did some work at the end of the year. It's taking you on to the beginning of the year. So we'll see how this plays out. But right now, this is clearly the best thing that's going on Raw right now at the moment. The other thing that was also a highlight for me and Raw, and again, you could take this for what it is. I think, if you heard the podcast, the last few episodes, in regards to the women's Intercontinental Tournament, I think compared to the United States Championship Tournament for the women's side on SmackDown, we felt this was a little bit more predictable. We're leaning a little bit in towards that. I will say both Dakota Kai and Lyra Valkyria won their semifinals match to set up a finals match. I believe that's happening next week as well on the Monday Night Raw on Netflix debut. If not, then probably Saturday's main event, but I believe it's probably next week. But yes, we get Dakota Kai. She got a win over Zoe Stark in a 1-2-3, pretty clean match overall. And then later that night, we also had Lyra defeat Io. And the match, again, was a really good match. She ended up, there was a close roll back and forth, roll-ups on one side where Io thought she had her. Then Lyra flipped it back and got a little bridge with it and got the 1-2-3. And so we're set up for Dakota and Lyra for the Women's Intercontinental title finals match. And as much as I would love Dakota to win this, again, we've been saying this for weeks. We've been saying this since the tournament was announced and we saw the brackets that Lyra is going to probably win this. And it's not any disrespect on her. She's a talented wrestler. Again, I think the biggest, I won't even say issue, the biggest thing that's not resonating with me at the current moment is we just don't have, at least I don't have enough equity built into Lyra to say that, okay, yeah, like, not say she doesn't deserve it, but a lot of it feels like the belt is going to make Lyra, people care about Lyra, when it almost feels like it should be the other way around. Where, as no disrespect, she's great talent. Just if you look at her career since she's come up to the main roster, she came up around WrestleMania season. She had the co-sign with Becky. Then Becky left. She got in a little bit of a feud with Damage Control, I believe, moving forward with that, and then just kind of disappeared. And so we know that Triple H is a fan of Lyra. This is one of Triple H's people. At least that's what we theoretically hear. And there is an element of like, hey, this is kind of the push that we're going to give you here. Almost maybe similar to Braun Breaker, I would say for myself, where it's like, okay, I see what you're doing here. I like Braun Breaker in certain things. As far as the character and how am I 100% over with it? Not quite. Not saying that there's any problems with the character. It's just more of just again the equity and that you build with these characters and the investment that you have. I just don't have enough investment where I'm like, oh yeah, like let's go, let's go. I'm rooting for you. But it's gonna be good. I think she's gonna be a great fighting champion when she does it. I think on the other side for Dakota, I think she's going to make it look competitive, but I do think there's a lot of back and forth between the Pure Fusion collection, and there might be some interference to maybe possibly keep Dakota clean in this. I know Asuka is out with the torn ACL. I feel like we're coming up at least on 9 months, so ACLs depending on the severity can be anywhere from 9 months to a whole year. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next few months that you'll see Damage Control and a 2-on-3 feud with Pure Fusion Collection, with the possible return of Asuka kind of getting back in, in in the near future to kind of tie it up, and we'll get our 3-on-3 match. But in the short term, it seems like Lyra is going to be our women's Intercontinental Champion, and it's going to be good. I hope when she does win the title, the one thing that I really hope they do, and this is not just for Lyra, they did this with other champions, MCMG. They did it with Kaden Carter and Katana Chance. You need to let them talk. You can't just let them just be people that hold these belts and come out, be happy faces, and not talk. You have to have them talk. You have to have them talk with purpose and not these cookie cutter babyface promos. You kind of have to give them a reason to kind of have the respect and the attitude, not even attitude, but just the respect for holding this title. And I don't care how you go about it, but you can't just let them just be out there just cookie cuttering it up. They have to be able to talk on the mic, get their points across, and have genuine feuds that just don't revolve around like I'm better than you or you're better than me, whatever. It's let's actually build something with this. So looking forward to that. And again, I think Lyra's gonna win, but I'm hoping Dakota is able to pull this out. But I felt the same way with Michin. I mean, I knew that was a little bit of a more of a toss up in my opinion. Even though when you look back on it, it's like okay, I can see Chelsea is easily the favorite here, but both of them have equity, which you probably, Chelsea has a little bit more mainstream connection with people, and Michin is a little bit more of just the diehards. But either one of these people, and not to say Lyra and doesn't deserve it, but we've seen them more on television that we have a lot more equity built into them that either one is going to be a win on this side. And the same thing is going to happen with Dakota and Lyra. And again, we've seen Dakota a lot more. She's been through multiple injuries to come back to this point. So it's more of, hey, I just know Dakota more than I know Lyra. And that's just the fact of like, hey, yes, Lyra was killing it on NXT, but when you come to the main roster, you're kind of, you're building a fan base with not just the NXT audience. Now you're building it with the general WWE audience that watches just Raw and SmackDown. And then also just the public facing, just the people that casually watch wrestling as well. So it's not saying it's a fast track for her, but it's more of just like, hey, we still got to build some equity. And if we're going to build equity with you on the belt, then hopefully there's actually some good promos and some good storylines that you have with your competitors. And again, the division has been needing this, both on SmackDown and Raw. So to have a mid-card title and to give these women opportunities to actually get into some feuds that are, something they can chew on rather than just the typical, oh, you hurt my friend or this is my friend. It's a lot of very fluff stuff. I think we can start getting into really, juicy storylines that kind of get the best out of both the challenger and the champion in the future, whoever the champions or the challengers are at the time. So Other things that stood out from Raw, mostly these are shake. For the same reason, it seems like we're kind of running on the treadmill, not in a bad way, but again, we're getting to the next week's show, so this is kind of like a wrap up. But New Day can't talk anymore either. They still can't talk. They are going around the stadium. They go into the ring. They get booed. They go up into the rafters. They get booed, and so that's been enjoyable. That's been enjoyable, and you know hopefully we continue something. Hopefully something big pops up next week. I know E's supposed to be there on the post show with Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett to talk about the Raw, the Raw that just happened, and so maybe E is on TV for whatever reason. Uh, but that was a pretty good. That's a good follow up for them. We got Otis and Gable. This one is, I mean, great wrestlers. Obviously, they have story together, but it's something that we haven't really touched in a few months as far as like, storylines that feels like we're just kind of coming back on here to just kind of round out the year of like, hey, remember this storyline? Let's round it out. And it is what it is. I think we might be a little late. I always said that, okay, if you're going to leave Alpha Academy and then you're going to start American Made, they're effectively the same team. There's some stalling on here. It's fine. Not mad at the match. You just wish this match could have happened earlier when the stakes were a lot higher. So, we talked about Dakota and Zoe, Damian Priest and the War Raiders with the Judgment Day. Gonna beat this like a dead drum. Please get Damian Priest away from the Judgment Day. I'm already done with the Judgment Day. They got new music, a little bit more of a hip hop trap beat. I don't know if it fits with them, but hey, you had the same music for 3 years. It was about time to update, and so it is what it is. But hey, the War Raiders, that's the shining part in this. The War Raiders still looking great coming from their comeback, tag team champions. The tag team rosters on both sides are going to be fun. I think again, getting back to actually having tag teams and not just two people that are thrown together and finding themselves out as they kind of go through their matches. This is going to make the tag team division a lot better in the long term by having teams like War Raiders, MCMG, Pretty Deadly, even Humberto and Garza. There is familial connections with those guys, so you can even say like those two guys are a tag team in the traditional sense. So the thing that stood out for me the most on here was more so the War Raiders than anything that had to do with Judgment Day and Damian Priest. And the fact that Finn Balor is like, I never forget and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, please just separate these people. Like, it's been long enough and we need something a little bit fresh for all of them. Because, you can get back to it. You could separate them like Dom and Rey Mysterio. But we know there is a connected storyline to them whenever they are on the same show or they cross paths. But right now, whether it be Liv and Rhea, whether it be Damian and Finn and the Judgment Day, it's just, guys, just leave us alone with it at this point. It's a little exhausting at this point. Going on, we had Sheamus interrupt Ludwig. So that should be a fun matchup to see and how that plays out. I'm hoping Sheamus gets his not triple crown, but whatever the titles that he needs to get the full round, the Grand Slam. I hope he gets the Grand Slam. Especially at where he's at in his career, he's done a lot. You just hope that you're not just the guy here to be putting people over at this time and taking losses in a championship whenever you get title shots. But overall, yeah, Raw for the last episode of an era on cable on USA. It's a pretty average show. Pretty average show. Again, but we know that you can't, you got to build anticipation for next week, but you don't want to give away too much that you felt like, man, like, did you just waste everything this week? So surprising that there wasn't more hype, I guess, if for a lack of better terms, enough. It wasn't as grandiose as you would have expected for it to be. the last week of the last episode of Raw on USA. Um, it just felt like another episode. It felt like another episode. It felt like an episode that was at the holidays. We were, just like, hey, this was part of the contract. And again, nothing, not to diminish the episode or anything. It's just more so again, the magnitude of what this means and the transition that we're making. You think something memorable would have been popped up. I always think back to when SmackDown changed the set from the ovals to the big fist. The last thing that we saw of the ovals was getting smashed through when Rhino smashed Jericho through the stage, and then the next week you get the big fist entrance. And so it doesn't have to be a stage thing, but something memorable that would leave us off of a bang of like, hey, the last episode of Raw on the USA on cable, this is what we got. This was the most memorable thing. And right now, at this moment, it seems the most memorable thing will be a CM Punk Seth Rollins promo, which, again, we've seen plenty of them. So, again, it's just them being in their bag. But surprising that we didn't get a bigger go home. Thanks for watching us on USA. Even though, again, WWE product is still going to be on USA, as we'll get to when we get to SmackDown and whatnot. But that, I think, ends our time at the flagship store of Raw, and we can head next door over to NXT and the Bodega. And this is the go home show for the Bodega because we have a pop up show tonight in NXT New Year's Evil. A pretty decent show again. Two things that stood out for me, whereas Kalani versus Lola Vice. That was a good match. I'm really interested to see how they continue to progress with it. I'm really curious to see how this all plays into Kalani's character because the way the match ended, she didn't necessarily have a problem with it, but I mean, she didn't really cause anything. But we had Cora Jade come out, having to was it Cora Jade? Yeah, it was Cora Jade that came out, started attacking Lola Vice with the kendo stick. Stephanie Valkyria comes out, tries to attack her, doesn't work. But the whole time, Kalani's just standing there and just kind of like, okay, just kind of watching it. But she ends up getting the win. So just the rivalry between those four, I don't know if it's going to be all four of them, but it's an interesting dynamic of what's happening between Kalani, Lola. I'm really interested inside that. Cora Jade and Stephanie Valkyria. And let's see how those interconnected storyline, if there's going to be any interconnected storylines between those four. And again, what happens with Kalani? I think I've been hearing through the grapevine that, maybe she's possibly teasing a heel turn. It would be interesting to see that from her, just because, again, we've just seen her such as a clean-cut babyface that to see a little bit more attitude would be very interesting to see how that plays out. And if she has that attitude, I'd love to see a Kalani Jordan with attitude go against someone like Jada Parker. But we'll get there in due time. But that's something that I'm keeping my eyes on, and I have as mid-rising. The other thing that stood out to me, and both Moody, he left some comments on for this one. We both do have this, I'm assuming, as mid-rising, but I have this as the Obafemi promo. But he wrote this as Eddie Thorpe stands tall over Trick and Oba. But overall, we get it. This is the go-home show. Eddie Thorpe did the thing that, as Moody would say, you never do. You don't hold the title belt when you at the end of the show when you are not the champion. That just shows that you're probably going to lose this match. My thing is Obafemi, and again, this guy is my guy. If Seth Rollins wasn't around, Obafemi would be my favorite wrestler in the world at this moment. He's an amazing promo. He threads the line between kayfabe and shoot perfectly well. He doesn't care about what y'all think. He don't care if you're a fan or not a fan. He's just gonna tell you like it is. I'm sticking with my statement that I made a few weeks ago. This will be a squash match. Eddie Trick is going to be protected. He's not going to take the pinfall. That's all Eddie Thorpe. But man, this is going to be easy peasy for Obafemi. And he's going to be the new NXT champion. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. Obafemi can't do no wrong, in my opinion. Let's go. It's going to be a wonderful title reign, and the crowd is going to be insane for it. The other thing that stood out from the bodega is, and this is from Moody's side, Andre Chase leaving Hank and Tank hanging. Don't have much context for as far as his opinion on this, but it was interesting to see Andre Chase being in a 6-man tag match. But again, he was with Hank and Tank against. Let me bring it up real quick. With Wesley, Tyson DuPont, and Tyreek Igwe. And hey, Wesley and his new tag team duo that he's got by his side, they got the dub. Hank and Tank, another good tag team. Another good tag team that you see whenever they get called up. Again, the chemistry that they have between one another, that it's not just built within just the performance center, but it's clearly like you guys have been wrestling with each other for the longest time. It's really good. They got some really good combo moves that, hey, again, the tag team division, they finally seems like they're about to put their respect on it in this coming year, as we're going to see some really dope tag team matches. But yeah, to see Andre Chase, obviously Chase U was done. He's probably still feeling the effects of just not wanting to be like, not having the old thing and trying, moving on to something new. But it is interesting to see how this makes what happens with Andre Chase. What kind of personality changes that make into him? Does Chase U come back in some form or fashion through some type of investor fund? I don't know, but it is interesting to see. I wonder how Hank and Tank will feel about it. And again, what is going to happen with Wesley and his new trio? Like, is this a new faction that we got going on? Let's see. Let's see what happens with that. I'll add one more shake. Not even shake. I'll add another one. Sol Ruka versus Izzy Dame. Izzy Dame got the win, and that's fine. It's more of just I'm more intrigued about the continued misunderstanding, rivalry. I started a rivalry. I'm not entirely sure yet, but between Sol Ruka and Julia. Julia has a championship match with Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's Championship. And the last couple weeks, Sol Ruka and Julia have been, partners last week. There was some interference that happened that helped Sol Ruka kind of lose her concentration. And so I don't think they're rivals per se quite yet, but again, as I'm reading through, they said they're odd friendship, and I think that's the best way you can kind of label it right now. Is just I don't think there's necessarily a problem between one another, but they are getting in each other's way, and this sets up for Roxanne to potentially retain her title through some unfortunate interference that may be whatever happening, but I'm really curious to see what happens when you get Julia and Zarya in Zarya and Sol Ruka in a little bit of a more of a engaged rivalry. Like right now, it just seems accidental, and at some point, it's gonna have to boil over to the point where, hey, stop getting in my way. And to see Sol Ruka versus Zarya, that's going to be a fun one, and especially for when it comes up to be a number one contendership match. So that's another one I'm looking forward to the in this next coming weeks as well. But that seems to be most of my thoughts. I mean, we also had Katana Chance and Kaden Carter versus the Meta Girls and Shotzi and Gigi. My girls, Meta 4. Lash and Jakara both they won this over Gigi and Katana. There was, I believe, some interference from the Unholy Union, or Fatal Influence, I believe. And so that obviously continues the storyline between the Unholy Union and them. At the same time, like, what does this mean for Katana Chance and Kaden Carter? So, like, you guys are the veterans in this match. You are on the main roster. You come back down and, you didn't get pinned, but you ended up still losing. So I hope it works out for them. Again, their biggest thing was, again, not having enough mic time because they're pretty good in the ring. They just, whenever they were on the main show, you just never let them talk. And so you can't just let people just be mutes out there. You got to have to let them talk unless the mute is part of their character. But clearly, these two don't seem shy to be talking. So it's more so you just got to give them the opportunity to let them speak on the mic and get their thoughts out and their opinions as why they are who they are and why they believe they're the best. But that was, I think, a pretty decent episode of NXT. A go home for us before we get into New Year's Evil. Either believe tonight or tomorrow. I would need to double check on that date. But pretty good episode of the bodega from the bodega. But from the bodega. So I think we can move on to Wednesday. And Wednesday, we'll start off before we walk into the coffee shop. We have some extended coffee shop news. But Omos, a name that we haven't heard in a long time. He's still on the WWE payroll. He's more of the attraction. You send him out to different places. And right now, WWE sent him to Japan. And in 2025, New Year's Day, Omos is the new GCH Tag Team Champion for Noah with Jack Morris. And it's I didn't see the full match. I've seen some highlights, and Omos is still looking great as a monster. Super intimidating. There was a little bit of a tease as he was coming out to the ring with another Japanese superstar. I'm not familiar with his name, but he was definitely intimidating in size, and it looks like it could be a great Goliath versus Goliath match. But Omos and Jack Morris. I'm not familiar with your game, Jack Morris, but you guys are the new tag team champions, and it's good to see Omos get the belt. It looks great on him. There's some great still shots of him, with the belt, and you're just like, okay, yeah, this dude's going to be a problem. And it's going to be interesting because, again, as far as here in the U.S., we haven't really seen him wrestle in a long time. So if you want to see what kind of improvement that he's made, this might be your best chance as far as watching this match to see, okay, where can we go with Omos? I wonder if he's going to have this belt on TV here in America. Interesting. Is Jack Morris going to make an appearance? Interesting. It'd be interesting to see what happens with this. WWE's been expanding their outreach. They've kind of putting down some of these high borders that they used to have, and now they're kind of lowering it down, as we've seen with TNA kind of happen, and some of the acknowledgments of these other kind of promotions that some of these wrestlers were at before they got to WWE. You seen them sending over to Japan. Shinsuke was obviously he was there as well. He had a match as well. So interesting thing. I'm great, happy for Omos. Happy that he has a championship on his waist right now. Hopefully that championship is shown on United States television here. Hey, if we get a Jack Morris and Omos going against some of the tag teams here, that would be great as well. So I'm just curious to see. I'm just happy for Omos, and I'm excited for what this could mean for him for the 2025, because a lot of people have been asking, where's Omos? Where's Omos? Where's Omos? And, we know he's still on the roster. We know he's getting paid. We know he hasn't been released. And so it's good to see that he's being used. They put a belt on him. Even if it's not WWE, Noah's still a pretty high respected promotion. That you have a title belt, and that title belt is still could be it's great cross promotion for both in Japan, but also here on the West. So I'm just really excited for what this could potentially mean for Omos going into 2025. So what a way to start the year for him. But let's take ourselves into the coffee shop. And this is the first episode of Dynamite, and actually any wrestling episode, at least on the Western Hemisphere, that we have in 2025. And to start this off, this was a big episode for AEW, because AEW for the last 5 years, 6 years now, has been exclusively on cable. It's been on TNT. It's been on CBS. Now, with their new television agreement that they recently signed, AEW is now on Max in a similar fashion to Peacock with WWE and Peacock or slash Netflix, where a lot of their library is not fully up there yet, but a lot of their library is going to be slowly put onto the Max server, so you can watch anything from the previous 5 years, 6 years. But you can also live stream AEW Dynamite and Collision and these other shows. And I don't maybe the PLEs, but I think the PLEs you might have to pay for a little bit extra still. But you will get all of that stuff on Max. So I was watching something else at the time, but I ended up coming back and catching the last about 15 minutes of Dynamite on Max. It was pretty good. Pretty good. I'm mostly gonna put the problems on HBO or Max and their servers, but I had a very choppy stream. At some points, the audio would desync from the actual video, and so wasn't the best quality as far as visuals. It did look better on Max than it did on TNT. It had the HDR kind of going on, but it was a hey, first steps. I put none of that on AEW. I put that all on Max, and honestly, that's unacceptable, Max, because you play NBA games and NHL games on there and all this other live content that should not have to be a problem for you to have that many buffering issues and video issues and audio issues with the stream. So Max, you're going to need to get that fixed very soon, not later. But another thing, as soon as AEW started, and when as soon as the show intro started, we got new intro music. And I'm not familiar with the old music, but this new music is I'm forgetting the group name, but it's I'm so excited and I just can't hide it. And it's an interesting choice of music. I don't hate it. I do think it's definitely something that can grow on. I think if I had to make one little tweak, is I wish there was a little bit of an electric guitar, especially on the bridge change, because it's a little bit of a remix, because it says the song's I'm so excited, but then on the kind of middle of the song, instead of saying I'm so excited, they say let's get excited. So that's not the original version of the song. So there is a little bit of a remix with it. I just wish that there was a little bit of a electric guitar that kind of amped it up a little bit, because it felt like they just used the 70s sample or the 80s sample, and it was very soft in tone. But I see where they were going with it. I just wish there was a little bit of that electric guitar to kind of get you to kind of like get that, ramped up vibe. Like we're about to go turn up in this joint. But interesting choice. I don't hate it. And I think in the long term, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun way to get started. It's gonna be to get the show started. And so that was a very interesting thing. When I first saw it, it was on I was on Twitter, and I was like, this can't be real. This got to be like fan made. But nah, that joint was real. And like I said, I don't hate it. I actually it works. I just wish there was a little bit of an electric guitar to kind of just give it that little bit of that Marty McFly, like it could have been dope. You could have had a nice dope ass solo. Like add an electric guitar to that intro and you got something there. That's all I'm saying. But two things that stood out for me for this. There's a lot of Miz this week. I don't think I had any Primos this week on the card for any of the shows. But Jay White over Swerve and Roderick Strong. I thought this was a great match. It was entertaining, obviously, with these three. The biggest thing that stood out for most people was probably how Swerve was taken out of this match, and that's with Ricochet coming with the biggest scissors in the world and then just, stabbing him repeatedly. You get the bloods and stuff like that. And so, again, I'm high on Jay White. I see this guy being someone that could possibly be the AEW face to, if Mox, again, saying this again, if Moxley's the NWO, Jay White is the WCW of this. And so I definitely do think it's going to be more in the near future than in the long term. that we see Jay White end up being the AEW champion. And I think that that might maybe, I don't want to say a pivot, but I definitely do think it's going to be an interesting time and a fun time. It'd be a new direction. It almost feels like it. It feels like we're getting something fresh instead of kind of sticking with the proven. Not to say Jay White's not proven, but we're familiar with at least from a television perspective with the John Moxleys, the MJFs, and whatnot. That it's like, hey, it's a fresh face getting such a major title. Even Swerve, like there's a lot of equity built up with them. But I mean, that was a bit of a fresh face. That was a good turn. So it almost feels kind of in that sense. It's like, hey, we're getting our guys back. We're getting AEW guys to we're getting this championship a fresh not contender, but a fresh holder to hold this and kind of lead it into the new down a new path in 2025. So the Swerve and the Ricochet of it is very interesting. The Ricochet, I like that they're leaning into the corniness of it. And this wasn't necessarily corny, but again, you're showing Ricochet in the sense of he can be vicious when he needs to be. I just like that even if there's some things within what Ricochet's character that you might not 100% fuck with, you could be like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing. And this is more than anything that I've seen Ricochet in probably like the last 8 years. So, hey, keep it up. Even if it means you're corny, I just hope it doesn't lead you into a place where you are known for your corniness rather than just like that was just something of it. That was just like a small thing that kind of got you over. I don't want this to be just something that it's tied to your wagon for your entire career. It's just something kind of like it's something that's just used as a jumping off point. So overall, it gets me. This is probably the most interested I'm in Ricochet that I have been in a long while, outside of like all those times where he's had the chance to win the Intercontinental or the United States Championship and just kind of fallen short. This actually seems like he has actually something that he could like dig his teeth into and kind of actually find something sustainable out of it, not just from a short-term storyline perspective, but an overall character perspective. And who is Ricochet? What is he, and what is he here for, and what does it really mean for him to be here, and what does he want out of it? So, looking forward to that as we continue forward. The other thing that stood out to me is Hangman versus Orange Cassidy. Again, these two guys will put on great matches. I know a lot of people feel that Hangman should probably be champion at this current moment, or should have been champion at this point. But I mean, hey, it's not. I don't think it's too far out the realm. You just not kind of need to get him back into it. But man, again, it's hard to when you put two competitors like this in a match, especially like someone who like Orange Cassidy is just like super cool. You're gonna get great matches, and it's a great way to start off the show. This was the first match of the night. Adam Page ended up getting the win. And the Death Riders did not interfere. It was a clean win at that. So again, this is kind of the small things with AEW, but again, is when you do get matches like this, it's still really good and enjoyable. You gotta give them their props. So shout out to both men, and I do think wherever you guys going forward, I do think you're going to be one of the top people to be looking out for the year. Other thing that stood out, I'll probably put this in shake and just to see where we head this, but the Acclaimed lost to the Hurt Syndicate. But the biggest thing here was that it seems like we're getting the start of the split of the Acclaimed as one of the partners of the Acclaim. I'm blanking out on the name. I believe it was Bowens had left the match, and so it seems like kind of let Caster just kind of take the pin, and not in the sense necessarily. I mean, it seems like he was kind of frustrated or fed up, but we'll see where this kind of goes. We'll see where this goes. I don't know if it's a New Day thing where like maybe they stuck together and they, as a wholesale, as a group, changed their personality, or Bowens has a problem with Caster or something, but maybe, or they want to go on their singles runs. They've done this tag team stuff for however long. I remember them cutting a few promos about a month or two ago saying this is our last chance, our last opportunity, and we got to make our chance. And then they ended up not winning the tag team title. So you think that's got to play a factor in their psyche, at least one of their psyches. And some of them's like, hey, we can't do it together anymore. Maybe I should take my talents to myself and go try to win me one of these individual championships. Not to say that we're necessarily over forever, but hey, sometimes you need to step aside and kind of go on your own path to figure out like where you at and what do you want. And so it's early, so I'm leaving it in shake, but I'm keeping my eye on this to see where this heads with between these two. But all in all, for a debut episode on Max with a new theme, first wrestling show of the year in the Western Hemisphere. Pretty good episode. Pretty good episode of AEW Dynamite Fight for the Fallen. Now we had, so it was a themed night this week, but really good. And I think there's some things that leaves us to be curious about in the next coming weeks moving forward. So shout out to everyone at the coffee shop. This was a pretty good week of wrestling from you guys. Let's move over to Thursday and let's keep it light. And being by myself this week, we only have one book of wrestling this week, and the book of wrestling, I'll put up the music just so we can bridge the gap. Get our drinking cups out. Got my coffee. But this week in the book of wrestling, I kind of mentioned it as we were at the coffee shop, but January 1st, 2019, the Elite announced the start of AEW. And so this is before anything. This is just like a clip that was put out, I guess, from the Elite. And it was just them has like, hey, look at our phone. Look at our phone. Like, what is this? What is this? We got this message. We got this message. And it's like, and I'll see. Let me play it real quick. We got Cody here. You got the I want to call them the knockoff Hardys. That's not Matt and the Jacksons. Hangman is there. They're all excited. They're hyping up All or Nothing. And then Adam Hangman Page is like, I don't have All or Nothing on my phone. It was like, what do you got? He's like, I got AEW. And so from there, that's January 1st. And then a couple weeks later, a couple months, like a month or two later, we end up getting All or Nothing. And so, 6 years later, we're here. AEW has been on TV for 5 years, 6 years now. You've grown from this small company to now you got distribution all the way, not only just on cable, but now you got it on Max and streaming, things of that nature. So it's great to see the growth. It wasn't, a linear path. You're still growing as a company. There's been ups and downs, controversy, and things of that nature. But the fact that you're still around and you're still finding success to whatever degree, it's important. This doesn't hurt anybody to have AEW around. It actually has helped more so than anything because it got WWE out of a stale writing position and just content position that they've been in before AEW kind of came out to be someone that plays in the same playground as them, at least from a lack of better terms. And we're getting the best opportunity. We're getting the best wrestling as fans that we've seen in probably ever, if not a long time. And then second of all, you're giving people opportunities to make money here in the United States that they probably didn't have the chance to before. Because the biggest thing is here is that they have a national broadcasting distribution on a television channel like TNT and TBS. Now you have TNA, you have some of these other promotions that, yeah, they might have visuals and they might have a TV partner, but TNA is on Access, and Access is not as easily as available to the general audience as something like TBS and TNT, which is literally in everyone's home, especially if you have cable. And so just to have that availability and knowing that, like, hey, I don't have to just go to WWE. I can make a living over at TNA, or not even TNA, but at AEW on less dates, and a bunch of money. It's a great opportunity, and I see it in the similar sense of the WNBA, where WWA NBA athletes do not feel like they should have to go overseas to make ends meet. Like, you're in the WNBA. Like, what is the problem? These teams are owned by NBA owners. The person that owns the Washington Mystics, that owns the Capitals, owns owns the Capitals. He owns the Wizards. He's in position to buy, or he wants to make the. He's been in several positions to buy the Washington Nationals. He owns a regional sports television network. You can't tell me that Ted Leonsis cannot pay his women athletes, fair pricing. The same thing. James Dolan owns the Knicks. You own the Sphere. You own MSG. You can't tell me you can't afford to pay the Liberty money? Come on now. So the fact that AEW exists, I might not like everything that they put out. It might not always be my flavor, my cup of tea. I'm never going to say they need to just go out of business. They most deservedly deserve to be here. There's great talent, and it's put a lot of shine on talent that, a person that probably just watches WWE would never even know or even think about. You're seeing an entirely different style of wrestling that you would ever see in WWE, and it's necessary. It's important and it's necessary. So, shout out to AEW for making it to 6 years, man. I know we celebrated your 5th year last year. This is your 6th, and we can't wait to see you get to 7 and then 10 and however long you guys get to. So, shout out to AEW. And that is the book of wrestling for this week. Now let's get to the boutique. And this is another special episode of the boutique. Not even a special episode, but it's a change, a slight change here. So with Raw officially no longer on the USA as of Monday, SmackDown is now the only show on USA. And now we have bumped SmackDown from what is always, since 1999, always has been a 2-hour show. SmackDown got a 3rd hour now. So it's going to be interesting, especially with the transfer window open. And, the draft is probably going to be here in a few months. But SmackDown now needs to have more wrestlers. Because that's the reason why Raw always got an extra draft pick, is because they had an extra hour. Now, if Raw is going to be going back to 3 hours and SmackDown is now at 3 hours, seems like there's going to be 3 draft picks on each side rather than Raw getting 3 and SmackDown getting 2. So right now we're going to get more people probably coming to SmackDown. We start off the show with Drew McIntyre. It seems like he's part of that transfer window, and he's going to be on SmackDown for a while. He had a bit of a confrontation with Cody. Moody started that out, and that was probably, I don't know, he didn't put it in an actual category, but he said Drew hugging Cody is a crazy red flag. Sure enough, it is. It is. I mean, you can't really trust Drew because, if you look at Drew and his motivations for who he's attacked and some of his qualms that he's had with others is, why are you siding with Roman? Why are you doing these stuff? Why are you doing this, that, and the third, and helping out Roman and the bloodline and this, that, and the third? Cody did the same thing. Cody tag team with Roman. So it's a little odd to see Drew McIntyre tell Cody that, hey, I'm here to help you. Watch your back, this, that, and the third. And, he's telling him to watch his back. And then what happens? Kevin Owens attacks him from his back. So it makes me think, are Kevin and Drew working together? They don't seem like two people that want to work with anybody at this point. But, hey, my enemy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it would be an interesting duo. And we talked about, hey, is there a possibility to get Drew, Kevin, Seth, and maybe another person, I can't think of it right now, as part of this kind of We Hate Roman stable? That would be a good look. That'd be fun. That'd be fun. And just with those 3 names, that's going to be a problem too. So I have that as probably my my mid-rising, and I'll probably put that at mid-rising for Moody as well. The other thing, and probably the biggest thing from the show, was Tiffany Stratton cashing in her women's Money in the Bank successfully and beating Nia Jax to win the women's championship on SmackDown. And I have this at mid rising, and it's definitely a primo. I think part of it, the reason I have it in mid rising is you could say it was expected because we were kind of dragging some of the storyline out. She's been teasing it for weeks, and you know, the traditional Money in the Bank. Oh, am I going to cash it in? Oh, I want to cash it in, but then something last second happens that takes them out of it, and they can't do it. And so there is a bit of okay. We knew that she was going to cash it in at some point. Would you say that she was going to cash it in on the SmackDown and not a premium, like a pop up show? That's a little bit surprising in itself. But again, it's the first episode of SmackDown that is 3 hours. And again, not even to mention the new episode on SmackDown. There's a blue mat now. There's a blue mat. I'm not entirely of a fan of it. It doesn't bother me too much, but I'm like, we get it. This is the blue brand. Do we need it to be explicitly put on the mat for us? Like, is Raw gonna have a red mat now? Come on now, like we're getting a little too cute with some of these things. So I wish they kept the mat just the regular paint, gray or whatever it is. But that's a small thing. That's not even worth even discussing in that larger level. But Tiffany, she teased it at first. She was like, I'm going to cash it in. Then she tossed over the ref, and you're like, what's going on? Because Nia is in a match with Naomi. She used the briefcase to knock Naomi out. Nia gets the win. She's standing there. Bianca's in the ring trying to comfort Naomi. And then Tiffany's like, hey, you should go attack Bianca. Nia goes attacks Bianca. Then as she goes up to hit the Annihilator, Tiffany hits hits Nia with the briefcase in the back. That gets Nia into the position of taking the KOD. And Tiffany gets the 1, 2, 3. Tiffany also ended up knocking out Candice LeRae as well. So that's how she was able to kind of have a clean shot at it. And Tiffany ends up winning the women's championship. And so somewhat expected in fact that we knew that Tiffany was going to cash it in. And if she was going to cash it in, whenever she was probably going to win it. So it's not surprising. I'm more curious now to see how we go moving forward with Tiffany. Is she going to be a face? Because obviously the crowd likes to cheer for her, but inherently her character at this point hasn't been a face. The most face thing that she's done is just being shady to Nia, and that's more recently. But if you're going to just be shady for the title, sure, but that doesn't necessarily you're necessarily shady. You're necessarily a good person at full. You could just be doing that to a heel just to kind of get the belt, but that doesn't necessarily mean that now that she has the belt that she's a face. So I'm more curious to see what happens with this in her reign. It feels like we're probably definitely going to get a rematch between Nia and Tiffany. I don't know when, but it will be interesting. Also opens up the possibility of what happens with the Women's Royal Rumble now. And now you have Liv Morgan as a champion and Tiffany Stratton as champion. Everyone's been thinking this since you see Tiffany Stratton is like, hey, Tiffany, Charlotte? Just going to throw that out there. Just going to throw that out there and, let the wrestling gods do what they will with that. But shout out to Tiffany Stratton. You've had a great 2024 and, successfully cashing in the Money in the Bank. You've held it, first of all. I think you were like probably the longest holder of the Money in the Bank briefcase next to Carmella. So the fact that you didn't just cash it in immediately like most women's Money in the Bank winners did, and you actually held it for about 6 months, and you successfully cashed it in, shout out to you. And curious to see how your 2025 plays out as women's champion. The other thing that I want to leave off with at the coffee shop is Motor City Machine Guns versus the DIY. Great match. I think it was it ended up in a no DQ because Pretty Deadly ended up getting into the ring, and then they were getting chased around by Umberto and Angel Garza, and that ended up kind of they ended up crashing into the pinfall, calling a no DQ. But I gotta give props again. More props to the tag team divisions again for the tag teams that are actually tag teams. Now DIY is probably, you could argue that they were kind of put together, but there is probably a lot of historical wrestling between those two guys before even NXT. That again, you see there's a lot of chemistry between them. But man, MCMG, amazing collaboration with them, and just the chemistry that they have with them, and their sequencing of moves, and then their combo moves that they do with each other is great. I think this is going to be a great. I hope it leads to a fatal 4-way, because this would be an awesome fatal 4-way match. If we were able to get a fatal 4-way TLC with these four guys, oh man, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. And hey, people, when we had the TLC back in the day, the OGs, you had the Dudleys, you had the Hardys, and you had Edge and Christian. I don't think, back in my recollection, most people were either choosing the Dudleys to win that or the Hardys. You didn't think Edge and Christian were going to win back-to-back times the TLC match, the first two TLC matches. So I would not be surprised if Pretty Deadly ended up pulling this out. I would not. If there was a 4-way TLC match, I would not be surprised to see Pretty Deadly pull this out. But overall, I'm excited for what this is. I'm really excited for the tag team divisions across the board on WWE side for what opportunities may be had, or in just what we might even see. Because I think we're getting back into a groove where a lot of these teams are actually teams and not people that are put together. Now you're gonna get Fraxium coming up possibly soon. They're within this group. They're kind of what we've been used to for the last few years, where it's like two guys get put together, and then they end up getting becoming a tag team. But they've also built enough chemistry where it's like, hey, they a threat too. But with Hank and Tank, with the War Raiders, with Fraxium, unfortunately, they are hurt. So we're gonna have to kind of get back with them. But there's a lot of real tag teams that have wrestled with each other and know each other very well, that it doesn't feel like we're just throwing two people together. And I think the fact that we have real tag teams that have actual chemistry with one another is going to make the tag team division 10 times better than has been in the last 5 years. So shout out to everyone in the tag team division. I am looking out for you guys for 2025. But now I think that is it for us at the boutique. Told you it's going to be a quick episode. We are in an hour and we're already on Saturday. So it just shows you how much jibber jabbering we do on both sides. New Year's Evil. It is, I believe, tonight. If not tonight, it's probably tomorrow. We have 5 matches, and I try to get Moody to put in his guesses for the show, even though he wasn't going to be here, but he did not be able to do that. So I'm going to save myself a loss here, and I'm just going to be able to just make predictions and not have to worry about am I winning or losing. Though I could probably just take the win, because if he didn't make any picks, it's basically you disqualified yourself. So I'll take the win. I'll take the win, because I told this dude, hey, if you can, put in at least at the bare minimum. If you don't get anything else, if you don't put down anything for Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Dynamite, whatever, at least get in your predictions for the pop-up show. And you didn't do that. And by that nature, I'm giving myself a W. And you get a loss. So take that. I'm happy. We're moving forward. Let's get into these predictions. Number 1 contenders match for the Women's North American Championship. We have Cora Jade, Kalani Jordan, Lola Vice, and Stephanie Vaquer Fatal 4-way. We just talked about this on at the NXT at the bodega. This is going to be interesting because right now you have Kalani versus Lola, which is a rivalry. It seems like a bit of a rivalry right now. And then you got Cora versus Stephanie. I don't know how this really plays out. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. I want to lean Kalani, but I think it's probably going to be Stephanie Vekor. I'm going to go Stephanie. I think with Kalani, I think there's, again, if you're leaning to her being a heel or possibly turning her into a heel or just showing some more heel tendencies, I think there is something where she could probably be, again, like the last match when she when it was the women's number one contenders match for the NXT championship. It's like, hey, I nearly had the match, but because Lola Vice wants to come in and interfere in my match, it ends up costing me the title because of some BS. And so I do think that, Stephanie, she's been in a lot of tag team matches, especially with Julia, that, hey, giving her an opportunity to come out of this and then get into a number one contenders match for the North American Championship, it's a good look. It's a good look. So I'm going to go Stephanie here. And I think that kind of gets Kalani and Lola into more of a feud, and then Cora Jade just giving more reasons to pick on Stephanie Vekor as we get closer to that title match that will happen between her and I am blanking on the women's North American champion right now. Apologies. Still early for me. Gigi Dolan, Shotzi, and Tatum Paxley, the Unholy Union versus the Fatal Influence of Fallon Henley, JC Jane, and Jasmine Nix. I feel like the Unholy Union. You just got back. You took an L. They interfered this past week. It just seems pretty straightforward, in my opinion, that you would kind of get your get back on them and get the win this week. So shout out to them. Heritage Cup sudden death. So last week we talked about William Regal inadvertently helping Lexus King get inadvertently. I don't even know. Like, why did Charlie Dempsey pick up the brass knucks? You dummy for that. But you did, and you ended up losing your Heritage Cup title championship. I'm gonna go Lexus King. Wow, why would this man have it just for 1 week, man? Like, I think Y tu papa. Why Regal? Why would you do that to Charlie Dempsey? Because he meant to do it. That's why he did it. And we're gonna see the real turn here. Regal is gonna be walking out with Lexus King. He's gonna be spitting bars in the next few weeks at Charlie Dempsey, talking about how he was a deadbeat son, all of that. I'm gonna go Lexus King, and don't be surprised if William Regal ends up doing the dastardly thing and knocking out his son with the brass knucks. Roxanne Perez versus Julia. Tough one. I'm actually going to flip that because I'm going to go with the easier one because I need a little bit of time to think about that. Trick Williams, NXT Championship versus Oba Femi. I said this, man. I said it weeks ago. Oba Femi. They don't need no explanation. Oba Femi, if it's not a wash because these two dudes try to do the Royal Rumble tactic and where they try to gang up on him and try to take him out, they'll probably try to powerbomb him through the table in the beginning of the match, and then it's just going to be Eddie Thorpe versus Trick. Don't matter. When that man gets back up, he's running through y'all. Trick, you're going to be busted up. Eddie Thorpe, you're going to take that 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to be the ruler of NXT as the NXT champion. Oba Femi. Let's go. No doubt about it. If I had to put my rubber stamp on it, Oba Femi is winning tonight. Or winning that night. So shout out Owafemi, you the champ. Can't wait to see it. Now to the hardest match to pick. NXT Championship, Women's Championship. Roxanne Perez versus Julia. Man. Everything I lean towards Roxanne Perez. But man, Julia's been pushed that it would seem surprising for Julia to lose. But I don't think Julia's really lost. And so this would just kind of cement Roxanne as, the top of the top. And, they can get back. It doesn't necessarily have to be a clean finish. But at this point, I think I'm going to go with Roxanne. And, give Julia her first bit of at least singles loss that I can think of right now. And, maybe you might get back at the Royal Rumble or whatever the next pop-up show for NXT in February. But I do think I'm going to say Julia has to go through a little bit of adversity to knock off Roxanne. But Roxanne, again, she's up due to coming up to the pop-up. She's up to the main roster. So it wouldn't surprise me. But Roxanne is just, I think there's a lot of respect for Roxanne. And I do think that it's like, hey, not only would it help for Roxanne to beat Julia and retain in this scenario and just kind of up her status even more as being one of the best women's wrestlers in the world. It also helps Julia because it's like, hey, when I do knock you off, because I think it's probably going to be a close win. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a surprise roll-up or something like that Roxanne ended up winning with. But then it gives you that faith, like, hey, Julia's like, hey, that close. I was that close. And if you didn't have to pull some rabbit out the hat type of trick shit, I would have won that. I would have won that. And so I'm going to call this round 1 Roxanne. Julia gets her get back in a later date. So my picks: Stephanie Vaquer, women's number 1 contender. Unholy Union gets the win over Fatal Influence. Lexis King retains his Heritage Cup. Obafemi is the new NXT champion. Roxanne Perez retains her championship. And with that, regardless of the outcome, I won. So, hey, 2, 9, and 3. Let's go. And Moody, you get your loss. 9, 2, and 3. And I don't want to hear no complaints. You had your chance. I gave you the opportunity. I said, just fill in your schedule. Fill in your opponents. That's all. Fill in who's gonna win. You couldn't even do that. And with that, I'm gonna count that as a DQ. And that's a win for me. Sorry, partner. Let's wrap this show up. This expedited show. An hour and 20 minutes. And I got my champion of the week is it's a personal one. I was just opening up Twitter and, I'm scrolling through and I see a tweet talking about, hey, Jimmy Uso shares a photo with his brother, Samson Fatu. And I'm like, huh? Samson Fatu? And as a fellow Samson, Samson is not a common name. So it almost feels like, hey, you gotta, it almost feels like a spiritual brother connection when you come across another Samson. You'd be like, oh, snap, Samson. Hey, what up, Samson? So with that, my champion of the week goes to Samson Fatu, a.k.a. Rikishi's son. Because, like, how many sons do you got, bro? That's like 5, and then you probably got a couple daughters. Like, bro, do not be pulling out. But Well, I've given him the I'm Tony Gonzalez, University of California championship belt. And if you're not familiar with that, Tony Gonzalez, NFL All Pro, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest tight ends of all time. And he is special also because whenever he would do his player intros, not all the time, but on occasions on player intros when he's introducing himself along with his other teammates, he would always have fun with it. At one point he did a Scarface impression saying, I'm Tony Gonzalez, University of California. But this is one of my favorites. It's when he acts it as a question. Like he's unsure if he's Tony Gonzalez and if he went to the University of South Carolina. Not South Carolina, University of California. And that's kind of how I feel when I saw the picture of Jimmy taking a brother with his brother named Samson. I was like, I had the question. I'm like, am I an Uso? Like, again, that spiritual connection, that Samson that we have with one another. I was like, oh, goddamn. I know I got my honorary Uso t-shirt, but like, I didn't know that was like given to me by the family though. Like, come on now. So the Tony Gonzalez, University of California, championship belt to Tony Gonzalez to Samson 5-2. Sam says we gotta stick together. But that's it. That's it for this week's episode of the Wrestling Re-Up, episode 26, halfway mark of a fucking full year. So, we got 26 more and then we got our 1 year anniversary episode coming up. So glad that we were able to get through 26 episodes. We got our first episode officially done with a solo dolo pod, and it's not too bad, but at this moment, I think we're done with this episode, and you can catch us next week for episode 27. We'll recap everything that happened on the week. We'll go through the pop-ups, who won at NXT New Year's Evil. We'll talk about Netflix on Raw in that first episode. If you want to talk to us and find out more, ask questions, you can hit us up on our email, the Wrestling Re-Up podcast, the Wrestling Re-Up at gmail.com. You can find us on any of the socials at the Wrestling Re-Up on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Just try to get us in contact if you're interested. But until next time, that's it. It's the Habshahey Samson, and I'm out. Peace.